Hi, I'm Jilly G. Welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you how to make a gluten-free pumpkin roll. So delicious, so fun and festive for this time of year. You could serve this in place of a pumpkin pie for your Thanksgiving dinner this year. Although I would eat this dessert any time of year. And as you can see, hardly any ingredients go into the cake part of this. So I've got my oven preheated 375. I've got a large cookie sheet here. It's something like 11 by 17 or 15 or something like that. I'll put the actual size in the description box. But it's pretty much what is known as a jelly roll pan. You could grease your cookie sheet and flour it, grease it really well and flour it, but I find that parchment paper is the easiest and the best. And if you've ever used parchment paper before, sometimes you want it to be flat and smooth. Other times, if you want it to be a little more flexible, you just need to crumple it up. And then it will fit in our pan. And it doesn't have to be exactly in the corners because once we put in the cake batter, it will kind of reach the corners. So that's ready. I had to get my offset spatula. That's really helpful for spreading out the batter. So the first thing I'm going to do is mix together the dry ingredients. In this bowl I have 3/4 of a cup of my gluten-free flour. I have a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, 1/2 teaspoon of cloves, 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and 1/4 teaspoon of salt. You could use pumpkin pie spice if you wanted to. You could add in some nutmeg and ginger if you wanted to. Really, whatever spices that you like to go with pumpkin. So set that aside. And then in this bowl, I'm going to crack my 3 eggs. All 3 of my eggs in there. And then I've got a 1/3 cup of honey. This would actually be 1 cup of sugar. And then whisk this together until it's really combined. And then I've got 2/3 cup of pumpkin. And this is just pureed canned pumpkin. It is not the pumpkin pie filling. And then whisk this until it's really combined. Once that is all mixed together, I'm going to switch to my spatula to stir in my dry ingredients. And you want to stir these in till they're just combined. Scraping the bowl as you go. It's such a small amount. So bring over your cookie sheet. And I like to pour it right in the middle. You really want to scrape the bowl and get all of it. There's not a lot of it here. And now with your offset spatula, I kind of hold the parchment paper and then just spread it to the edges. And then I try to make sure that it is even all the way around. You don't want any really thin spots or really thick spots. Use your other spatula to clean off this spatula. Once you've got that in an even layer, this will go into the oven. My oven is preheated, again to 375, for about 13 to 15 minutes. You want the cake to be lightly springy. You could do the toothpick test, but I feel like this, you can tell it's such a thin layer. Just by touching it, you can tell that it's done. So while it's still warm, this is where we need to roll it up. And usually, traditionally, you would use some kind of kitchen towel or a tea towel and a lot of powdered sugar. But I'm just going to roll it up in the parchment paper. Very carefully. Parchment paper really makes everything so easy. And then very carefully take the sides away. So now I've got my hot pads on because it is still hot. But I'm going to take them off because they're too big and bulky for my little hands. I'm going to trim my parchment here, just so it doesn't tear a hole in my cake. There we go. Use the parchment paper to help you. We're going to roll this up. The reason we want to roll this while it's still warm is so we can put the filling in and it kind of remembers its shape. But you also want to do this while it's warm so it doesn't crack. So now we've got our nice little roll here. I'm going to transfer this to my cooling rack very carefully. And we want this to cool off to at least room temperature. It doesn't need to be ice cold, but we can't put our filling in it if it's still warm because then our filling will melt. My pumpkin cake is all cooled off. Even just at room temperature, it feels on the cooler side. I didn't even put it in the fridge or anything. So now for the filling. You don't have to have a stand mixer for this. It just makes it fast and easy. So I've got 6 tablespoons of softened butter or room temperature butter in the bowl of my mixer. And then I've got 8 ounces of also soft room temperature cream cheese. And the original recipe for this filling is 1 cup of powdered sugar. So it's really not very much. But I'm going to go with some maple syrup today. And I've got not quite 1/4 of a cup. And I've discovered that it might make your filling too runny. So I may or may not use all of this maple syrup. I'm mostly going for the consistency rather than the full amount. But maple and pumpkin go so great together. On about medium speed, I want to beat my butter and cream cheese until they're really combined. And when it's creamed together like this, I like to scrape down the bowl just to make sure I don't have any chunks of butter or cream cheese hanging out in the bottom. And then I want to beat this on medium-high speed until it's light and fluffy. I'm going to scrape the bowl down again, add in my vanilla, and then slowly start adding in my maple syrup until it looks right. I'm going to scrape the bowl again. You can see that some of the vanilla is at the bottom and some of the maple syrup is at the top. I'm going to whip this on about high speed for a few more minutes. I don't want this to be too runny with too much maple syrup. Scrape the bowl down again and the paddle here. And this is looking really thick. So I can add in a little bit more maple syrup. Again, I'm going for a consistency rather than flavor. Although I do want the maple flavor in there. Back up to high speed. And this is the consistency I'm looking for. And I'll tell you, whenever you're whipping cream cheese and butter, you want everything to be really room temperature so you don't get lumps in your cream cheese, but sometimes it just happens. So my cream cheese is a little bit lumpy, but this is the consistency that I want it to be. I don't want it to be a super stiff filling that it will be hard to roll up our pumpkin roll, but I don't want it too soft that it will all just squish out. And I ended up using all of my maple syrup. In the past, when I've made this filling before, if you add in too much maple syrup, it will make your filling way too runny. And it's still savable. You would just have to add in more cream cheese and butter and then kind of start over. but sometimes it's hard to come back from. Takes a lot more ingredients and effort. And of course, if you're using powdered sugar, you don't have to worry about any of that. So now that our filling is done, I've got my offset spatula again. We're going to bring over our cake roll and then very carefully unroll it. We'll see how good of a job we did, and hopefully it doesn't crack. So far, so good. So now for the filling, I usually plop it kind of down the middle. And then just start spreading it out. We want it to be an even layer, but I'm not going to go all the way to the edges because when you start rolling it, it will kind of squish. But be kind of gentle. You don't want to tear your cake. And if you accidentally go to the edge, it's all right. Once you've got your filling in an even layer, we're going to start rolling up our cake again without the parchment paper in the middle this time. So this edge down here is already curved from where we were rolling it before. The nice thing is you can use the parchment to help you lift up the cake. But you want to roll it as tightly as you can without using too much muscle and squishing your cake. But just very gently and tightly roll it up. Once you've got it rolled up, you can actually wrap it back in the parchment paper if you want, but I like to put it in plastic wrap. I'm going to move that aside. And you might have never thought that you could make a cake roll without powdered sugar, but you can see it doesn't stick to the parchment paper at all. And I do have a small crack here, but that's all right. Because I'm closer to this edge, I'm actually just going to roll it onto my plastic wrap. Very carefully. And then just roll it in the plastic wrap. Look at that. You could serve this now, but I like to put it in the fridge and get my filling a little bit firm before I slice it. I'm going to put it on my cooling rack. Very carefully. Doesn't that look great? My pumpkin roll has been chilling in the fridge for about an hour. So now that it's nice and chilled, I have a platter that isn't quite big enough for it. But whenever you're serving, you usually cut off the ends anyways. They don't have as much filling and they don't look as nice. So let's get it unwrapped, and I want to be very careful that I don't unroll my roll. I did a good job of wrapping this up. I'm going to cut a little bit off of each end just so I can fit it on my platter. There's my first end. And I should have cleaned my knife off. That's all right. That will be the bottom anyways. I want to put this seam side down onto my platter. Unfortunately, I do have a crack here, but that's all right. Look at that roll. It sure looks good. Traditionally, you would dust a pumpkin roll with powdered sugar. I'm not using powdered sugar, but I do have some coconut powdered sugar that I'm going to dust the top of my pumpkin roll with. I could have used this for my filling, but I really like the flavor that the maple syrup gives. So now we'll just very carefully dust our pumpkin roll. And I think it's making my crack stick out even more. Not exactly like white powdered sugar. It's got a little brown tinge to it because it's coconut sugar, but equally delicious. Oh, I should give myself some over here. There we go. And the nice thing about being the cook in the kitchen is you get to eat both of the ends. So let's give it a bite. Turn that around so you can see. This is delicious. My cream cheese butter maple syrup filling is the perfect amount of sweet. Just a hint of maple, smooth and creamy, even though it was lumpy. And the pumpkin cake, even though I do have a little crack here, it is not dry and crumbly at all. I don't think you'd even be able to tell that this is a gluten-free pumpkin roll. You saw how well it rolled up and held its shape. If all I have is one little crack on the top, I'm fine with that. And it's delicious. It has just the right amount of spices. Let me know what you think if you make this recipe. Whether you use powdered sugar, coconut powdered sugar, maple syrup in your filling, whatever you choose, it will be delicious. And maybe you will try a new holiday tradition this year, and instead of pumpkin pie, serve a pumpkin roll. Or for that matter, serve this for a brunch. I know a lot of people have brunch around the holidays. I'd eat this for breakfast every day. But thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have any questions or comments, let me know, and I'll see you on the next one.